Hi class, welcome to International Business Negotiations, Lecture 1. Lecture 1 is going to cover the introduction to this course. My name is Esther Baguma. Let's start off by looking at the different terms that you're going to encounter throughout this course. One of the main terms that you're going to find is conflict. Conflict is a fight or a disagreement between two or more parties. And these fights usually lead to violence or loss of a relationship between the two parties, or they may lead to loss of business between the two conflicting parties. And we could cite some of the examples of conflicts. One of the examples is a conflict between Uganda and Rwanda. The conflict may be to do with trade, or it may be to do with politics. Another example could be between companies, like between MTN and Airtel. Okay, it could also be between the conflict could also be between individuals. Okay, husband, wife. Okay, so those are the different some of the examples of conflicts that you are going to come in to negotiate. Another term that you're going to look at is the curve of conflict. The curve of conflict shows how the use of force in violent conflicts tend to rise and fall over time. It also shows how you can recognize different phases of conflicts. And then also, it can also show you how to characterize your conflict management. It also shows the peace building efforts that you're undertaking throughout the course of the conflict. And this is how the curve of conflict looks like. At the bottom, right at the bottom, we have peace. It starts with peace and diplomacy between the two parties. And then maybe a conflict erupts. So you find that you're working on conflict prevention, trying to prevent the conflict, but it happens anyway. So you have to get into crisis management. And then at the top of the curve, obviously the conflict has escalated. So you need to do peacemaking. And after peacemaking, you're going to find that you're going to do conflict mitigation. Okay. And then if the conflict mitigation is working, you'll find that you will now start doing peacekeeping between the two parties. And then finally, when the peace is achieved, you'll find that we shall have the conflict resolution right at the bottom of the curve. So that is the curve of conflict. Another term that you're going to look at is negotiation. Negotiation is a principal tool that we use in conflict resolution. Okay, and it's defined as the process of communication aimed at achieving specific goals. Okay, whereby these two parties will come together, set goals that meet their interests. Okay, that are better than their best alternative. We are going to look at a concept known as BATNA, okay, in the next slides, which looks at best alternatives for each party, okay. So conflict resolution can be solved using negotiation. So it is our tool, our major tool in conflict resolution. Another term that you're looking at is mediation. Mediation looks at efforts that are put in play by a third party person, okay, someone who is not part of the conflict, okay, that brings these two parties together to solve a specific conflict, okay. So it is similar to negotiation, only the negotiation involves the representatives from the two parties. Now mediation will now bring in a third party person who is not part of the conflict. Okay. Let's give an example of if Uganda, there's a conflict between Uganda and Rwanda, we'll bring in the South African president to mediate the conflict. Or we could go it as two parties, we have a representative from Uganda and a representative from Rwanda. So that will be negotiation. The moment we include the third party person, that is the South African president, then it becomes a mediation. Okay, yes, that's the difference between those two terms. Now, let's now look at the purposes of negotiation. Why are you negotiating? Okay, and then we're also going to look at tactical objectives in negotiation. Now, the difference between these two is objectives. Tactical objectives are usually short term. Okay, they're usually short term goals, and then the purpose of negotiation looks at long term goals. That's the difference between the two. Okay, you're going to find that there's a small line between the two. Now, let's first look at the purpose of negotiation. Why are you negotiating? Before you come to the table, definitely you have to set some goals that you're going to meet, long-term goals that you are meant to be met. Now, one of them is preventing or stopping the violence. Okay, so your major goal has to be to stop or prevent the violence from going on. Okay, another goal that you're going to look at is you're going to advance or protect the interests of the two parties. Okay, if the interests were there already, then you're going to improve on them. That's what advancing is. Or you are going to protect what is already existing. Okay, maybe someone is trying to protect their borders. Maybe their borders are being encroached on. Okay, that is the interest of one party. So you're going to try and protect that border from being taken by the other party. That is advancing or protecting the interests of either party. You're also going to look at and reducing exposure to risk. Okay, you're going to help these parties to negotiate such that they can reduce or limit damage to their interests, okay, by enhancing their overall international stability. Okay, so you should look at improving or reducing the risk. Okay, you're improving the protection of exposure to risk. Okay, for this party, and you're also going to look at building durable peace. Okay, between the two parties. Let's not look at solving a conflict, then after a few months it escalates again. So you're going to look at building durable peace between the two parties. Now, those are purposes of negotiation. Now, what about the objectives of negotiation? Objectives usually are set in place to meet the purpose, okay, of negotiation. So one of the objectives that you are going to use is going to be to change the attitude or behaviors of the parties. Okay, you're going to change the attitudes and behaviors of the two parties. How are you going to do that? You're going to break down what you call stereotypes. Okay, for example, people say that US is proud, China is proud. So if you're going to negotiate with US or China, how are you going to do it? Okay, so you have to first of all break that stereotype that these are proud countries. You're going to look at them as people that you can negotiate with. You're going to break that stereotype that they are proud. You're going to look at a prospect of bringing them to the table, because the moment you have that in your head that they are proud countries, you already lost in the negotiation. Okay, so you have to break that stereotype that these are proud countries. They should be able to come to the table. Okay, pride or no pride, you find a way of bringing them to the table and overlook that pride. That's what you look at, changing the attitudes or behaviors of the negotiators. Okay, and then we need to, another objective is you need to define a process. You're not just going to wake up in the morning and say you're going to negotiate. You have to plan. Okay, so planning involves procedure, phases, okay, that you're going to put in place, stages in negotiation, that I'm going to start with this, then go to that, then go to that. Okay, so you have to plan how your negotiation is going to go. So you're going to put together what you call a negotiating process, okay, before you come to the table. The third objective is you are going to find a way of jointly solving problems, okay. So as negotiators, you have to work a way of reconciling opposing interests between your two parties. Okay, so you're going to come together and jointly solve whatever problem that you are facing. Okay, such that you can advance the interests of both parties. Even if they're incompatible, you find a way of bringing the party interests together such that you can jointly solve problems. Another objective is you're going to build relationships at the end of the day. So when you're in negotiation, your goal is at the end of this negotiation, we need to build a relationship. Most of the time, many negotiations, if they are not so big, if the conflict is not so big, we don't really build relationships. So you're going to find relationships in larger conflicts, like political conflicts between countries or trade conflicts between multinational companies. Um, the difference between objectives and the purpose, I just mentioned that. Purpose, you're looking at long term, and then objectives, you're looking at the short term goals. So objectives are set to meet the purposes of negotiation. Then we also need to define success in negotiations. Success looks at short term versus long term. Okay, negotiations. Short-term negotiations look at, I've just mentioned earlier on, small stakes, like small conflicts, okay? So they don't really require much preparation, or you need to plan and all that. You may not need to plan in the short-term negotiation if you're looking at a small stake or small conflicts. However, if you're looking at bigger conflicts like politics, trade between multinational companies, then you are going to have to do, definitely, you are going to have to prepare, okay? And your success is going to be termed as a long-term success, okay? So short-term looks at mostly covers small steps, and then long term usually covers negotiations that are involving larger stakes like politics and trade between multinational companies. Now, the other type of success that you're going to look at is a win-loss or a win-win success. Okay, a win-loss success is where one party wins and then the other one loses. Okay, no one wants to lose in a negotiation, but sometimes it happens. So you can get into a negotiation knowing that you may win or you may lose. So don't get disappointed. You need to go with that open mind. Okay, then you have a win-win. Okay, so sometimes both parties win. Okay, so we term that as a win-win success. If both parties advance their interests successfully, then it's a win-win situation. Okay. However, sometimes when a party feels like they are losing, they may walk away from the negotiation. So, you as a negotiator, you have to put that in mind. Okay. Another definition of success in negotiation is agreements versus relationships. Okay. Um, Sometimes when you're looking at small stakes, we talked about this earlier on, like probably you're purchasing shoes in a shop. You may not create a relationship between you and the seller because they're just shoes. You may buy shoes in the next shop or the other one, okay, the next one. You may not necessarily keep coming back to this person, okay, unless they have really special, good customer care. But however, um, a relationship in a successful relationship looks at um, long term, okay, a long term um, stake, okay, that is involved. So examples of relationship success looks at um, examples like politics or trade between multinational companies. Okay. Agreements, on the other hand, um, sometimes they may be long term or short term. Okay. Also, short-term agreements usually look at small stakes, and then long-term agreements look at larger stakes. Okay, like politics and trade between multinational companies. Smaller stakes are probably between buyer and seller. Maybe you're just buying a car. Okay, so you just sign a short-term agreement to sell this car, and then we are done. Okay, so there's no relationship in this. But if you're looking at long term, you may need to build a relationship between you and the other party. Okay. Lastly, let's look at BATNA. BATNA means best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Always, the negotiator should be prepared with a BATNA. Okay, that means what is your interest in this negotiation? What do you hope to achieve? Okay, what is your best alternative in this negotiation? And then what you win after that or lose will be measured according to this standard that you set. Okay, so a BATNA is a kind of a standard that we measure against our win-lose within a negotiation. Okay, so a good negotiator must be able to show their BATNA. Have they done well or they didn't perform? That's what BATNA means. Now, in the course of the coming classes, we shall be looking at key elements of negotiation, one by one per class. The first key element is approach. Okay, now approach looks at the style of negotiation. Okay, so it examines the conflict and then gets what style. Each conflict has a particular style that you're going to use in negotiation. Okay, so we shall cover that one in details during that class. And then we're also going to discuss people. Okay, the element of people looks at relationships and culture. Okay, culture and relationships play a big role. As you had earlier on, we mentioned relationships over and over, because relationships play a key role in negotiation. How do you relate to the other person? If you cannot talk to the person, then definitely there will not be any negotiation. So your relationship really, really matters between you and the other party. And also your culture matters a lot. We're going to talk a lot about this during that class. You have a class dedicated to yes, relationship and culture. You may find one time I'll tell you this in that class. I stretched out my hand to greet a colleague at work, and he just held back his hands, like at the back of his hands. He was like, he shook his head. So I was a little bit embarrassed, but I remembered that in this guy's culture, they don't shake hands, especially women's hands. So I understood and moved on. So from then on, I knew that no shaking hands with this guy. So it's very important to understand culture. Otherwise, you can lose a relationship between you and the other party. Then you also have leverage. Leverage looks at inducements, coercion, and normative standards. Okay, inducements looks at small like gifts. Okay, that you're going to give to the other party. small concessions that you give to the other party. Also, coercion, you need to coerce them into doing some things. And sometimes it may be in terms of monetary terms or whatever you can come up with. So we shall look at leverage also in more details in that particular class. Then also we are going to look at process in more details. Process looks at the different phases in negotiation. Remember, we say that you cannot come to a negotiating table without a plan. Okay, so your plan will show the process that you're going to use in negotiation. So the process basically outlines the phases, okay, in negotiation. So those will be our key elements that you're going to discuss throughout this course, okay. And that brings us to the end of our class. Thank you for listening. The next slide has questions. You can look at them, answer them. And any feedback, please feel free to communicate on WhatsApp, on email, or calls. Thank you for listening. See you in the next class. Bye.